In this final video on tackling ability, what I'd like to discuss is how fatigue influences the execution of this skill, and importantly, the physical qualities that can protect against fatigue-induced reductions in skill. This has important implications for the coaching team, but also for the strength and conditioning staff. This video describes the influence of fatigue on tackling ability in collision sport athletes. Essentially, our question was, if we expose our players to the most demanding passages of play, what happens to their skill? Does their tackling ability hold up under pressure, under fatigue? And if it does hold up under fatigue, what are the physical qualities that allow that skill to be protected? Now, before I go too far into this video, I'd like to introduce Peter Ryan. Peter Ryan is an expert in defence. He's worked as a defensive coordinator for the North Queensland Cowboys, the ACT Brumbies, the Queensland Reds, and the Brisbane Broncos. And he also works with American football teams to help the players develop their tackling technique. Rhino, from a coaching point of view, how much does fatigue influence the execution of tackling skill?
The repeatability for a player, well, I'd probably say it would be 20, maybe 30 seconds to be able to recover and then go again. But obviously at some given point, there is fatigue there that then disables the individual. And I suppose we could call it disables. Being able to be as efficient in your last tackle as you were in your first tackle.
So let's look at the demands of a collision sport like rugby league. Now, this is a very short clip, but what I'd like you to look at is the player that comes into the screen on the left-hand side. And look at the work that he does in a 40-second intense passage of the game. So that player has just made a tackle around the legs and he's going to chase hard to the right. That's him chasing now. Second contact effort. He's around the legs again. That's his third contact effort. That's 4 contact efforts in a row. And he's just made a 5th contact effort. Now the point with this clip is that these contact efforts, repeat efforts, are extremely demanding and they have the potential to impact on skill, and particularly they can impact on your tackling ability. So our project set out to determine whether fatigue actually influenced tackling skill. So what we did was have our players perform high intensity, repeated high intensity effort work, and it involved stringing tackles together in a row with sprints and very short recovery, and then asking them to execute one-on-one tackling. And what you can see from this figure on the left is, as we introduced these repeated high intensity effort bouts, tackling ability tended to decrease as the fatigue increased, as heart rate increased, as blood lactate concentration increased, as the RPE increased, tackling ability went through the floor. This is just some still shots of the one-on-one tackling activity on each of those repeated effort bouts. And in the first 2 shots, you can see that the player has made good under the ball contact. But in the latter 2 shots, what tends to happen is he drops his head into contact, he loses his feet, and he loses all of the power in the contact. And remember, one of our key cues for coaching one-on-one tackling ability is to speed up into contact. So clearly he's not able to execute the tackle as well as we'd like under fatigue conditions. But not all defending players respond the same way to fatigue. So on average, we can see on the left that fatigue reduces tackling ability. But on the right, we can have two very different responses. We can have a player with very good technical skill under resting or fresh conditions, but that skill tends to decline under fatigue to a point where the tackling skill is actually lower than a player with poor tackling ability under resting conditions. So what it tells us is if we're going to test and train tackling ability, we probably need to do it not only under resting conditions, but also under some level of fatigue to get an idea of how that skill is going to hold up under the pressure and fatigue of match play. Now, our second question with this project was to see if we could understand what physical qualities protected against these fatigue-induced reductions in skill. We looked at a wide range of physical qualities. Now, in the past, we'd seen that aerobic fitness protected against these fatigue-induced reductions in skill. But it appears that aerobic fitness only protects you to a certain point. There's a certain amount of aerobic fitness that's beneficial, but after that, there's other physical qualities that are more important. And just as we'd found previously that lower body strength was strongly associated with tackling ability, it was the same in this project, but it was also strongly associated with tackling ability under fatigue. Players who had better lower body strength also tended to be protected against reductions in skill under fatigue. They had better tackling ability under fatigue conditions. So while on average, players have a reduction in tackling ability under fatigue, if you have better lower body strength, and in this case it was a squat, you're less susceptible to fatigue-induced reductions in skill. So how do we put all of this together to come up with drills that stick under pressure and that hold up under pressure? Well, the first thing we need to do is define the purpose of the drill. What are we trying to achieve with our drill? The second question we need to ask is, are the skills that we're teaching being taught in a game-like context? And the way we work that out is we try and understand the pressures that influence the execution of the skill. And then we have to ask, are our players gaining exposure to these pressures on a regular basis? If we're not exposing players to these pressures on a regular basis in practice, then we shouldn't be too surprised if these skills don't transfer to the competitive environment. So Peter, in our one-on-one drill, we set up the ideal conditions, perfect conditions, but not all tackles in a game have these ideal situations. Sometimes you have a player off balance or backpedaling. How do you deal with those situations?
Sometimes you can have to make a tackle and you might be going backwards to make a tackle, but in reality, you've got to have body weight forward at the contact point. So it might be you are running backwards and then you happen to get 1 foot back and the next foot forward so that then you're able to then power or take that step, which then powers you up through the tackle. And we've used water bags, maybe 4 kilograms of water inside a water bag that you hold with 2 hands in front of your body. Definitely a change in terms of the ability to actually have your core stability turned on, and then obviously be able to react to what's coming towards you in terms of an attacking player with a ball. So being able to change directions or force your body into contact shape just before contact quite often means the difference between actually making the tackle or not making the tackle. And because the water is moving inside, you are constantly readjusting your body weight or shape based on what the weight in the water bags do. On top of that, being able to stay have that core strength to keep your body in alignment. So I use that regularly, and I put their body shape, try and put their body out of shape as much as possible for them to then regather and then actually make an efficient tackle.
So to summarise, it does seem that fatigue reduces tackling ability, but players with better lower body strength had better tackling ability under fatigue conditions. Lower body strength protects against fatigue-induced reductions in skill. If we want to maximise the transfer of practice to the competitive environment, then we need to change our thinking a little bit around variability and look at variability as being functional rather than a skill error. If we can force players to adapt their skills to variable practice conditions, it's more likely to develop creative patterns of movement behavior, which ultimately develops flexible and adaptable skills that are robust under pressure and fatigue. So hopefully you can see that the results of these projects are directly relevant to the football codes, American football, rugby union, rugby league, any sport with a collision or contact component. I really hope you enjoyed the videos. If you did, leave a comment in the comment section below. Feel free to visit us at gabbettperformance.com to see the kind of work that we do with coaches and performance staff around the world.